Hey everyone, welcome back. We are studying 1 Samuel chapter 9 today. Let's go ahead and pray as we get started. God of heaven, Father, we bow before you. We humble ourselves before you, Yahweh. Thank you for the opportunity to study and learn from your word. I pray that you would grow us, speak to us today, Father, through this chapter. I pray that you be with all those viewing this video, Lord, that you would encourage them and strengthen them in your word. Keep them from deception and help them to know you better. Help us all to know you better. In Jesus' holy name, amen. Okay, everybody, we're going to jump in here to 1 Samuel chapter 9. I actually had a bunch of things I kind of wanted to say about other topics just as an update, but I'm going to save that for some videos going on the main tab on my channel. By the way, if any of these lessons are helpful to you, go ahead and send them around to people. I want to be of service, and I'm hoping that I'm doing that through this teaching. When we got to through our chapter yesterday, where did we leave off? We had seen that the people of Israel had been corruptly asking for a king. They were no longer trusting God to be their king and trusting in his process, which is always a faith-building, providential process. They wanted a human government to tax them instead and govern them instead. Crazy. I prefer God's way, honestly. And we also saw that, we know this is leading up, if you're familiar with the book of 1 Samuel, this is leading up to King Saul, basically the first king of Israel. We're going to meet him in this chapter coming today. But we also talked about how Israel clamoring after a king, a human king, to help it defeat its enemies, which were actually a spiritual problem. This was a type pointing forward even to today with the pursuit of, or the clamoring of many Christians for Donald Trump to be a king to help them overcome their enemies when it's actually a spiritual problem afflicting our country. We'll reference that a little bit maybe, but I'm going to focus on Saul today. But as you're thinking about Saul, you can think about Trump, and there's other types that Saul applies to. I feel bad for Saul because he is a type. God used him as an object lesson for thousands of years. 3,000 years ago, Saul lived. Okay, here we go. Verse 1. There was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Bechorath, the son of Aphiah, a Benjamite, a mighty man of power. Okay, so this does not mean that he is necessarily physically strong. This is saying he is got substantial earthly power, meaning he's got a lot of, I'm sure he's got big herds, he's got a lot of money, he's got status, he's probably considered a nobleman among the Benjaminites of his area. This would have been the, I guess put it this way, if we're in the Old West and you're living in a gunslinger town, he would have been the big ranch owner. Okay, that's who Kish was, all right? So, and he may also have been physically strong. This may be alluding to his prowess in battle. And in the ancient world, that is how noblemen often got land and things. They get a great reputation in war for their people. The people respect them for their exploits, their heroics they did on the field, and they lift them up and give them opportunities. And usually such a warrior is also aggressive in nature, and he will go after things and take risks and things like that, and that can build wealth. So that's who Kish was. These names And I'm sure if he's that type A personality, he probably had a beautiful wife, which had to most likely, because it says he had a choice and handsome son whose name was Saul. And there was not a more handsome person than he among the children of Israel. From his shoulders upward, he was taller than any of the people. So, so Saul was the most handsome man in Israel and taller than everyone. So, in many of the ladies' eyes, he would have been quite the catch. Okay. Now, I don't want to bypass these names, though. As I said, sometimes often God encodes another layer of teaching in some of the meanings of the names of genealogies or lists of things like that. Sometimes it became hard to figure out what is being said. I haven't been able to see something in every time, but a lot of the times there is something like Genesis 10, I believe it is. No, Genesis 5. Sorry, Genesis 5 with the list of the patriarchs. It's a very powerful sentence encoded in the meaning of their names. I've talked about that before. That sentence in Genesis 5 says, "Man, Adam, is appointed mortal habitation, but blessed God, he shall descend teaching, and his death shall bring powerful rest." That is the sentence encoded in the names of Genesis 5. So these names do have a meaning sometimes behind them. It's not my invention. I'm not the first one who's seen this. But in this case, we do have, I believe, a sentence here. So because we remember, Israel asked God for a king. And Samuel was grieved, and God said, "Don't be grieved, Samuel. They're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And I'm going to give them what they want. But tell them what they're going to get. Make sure they're warned." And the people said, "We want it." So let's look at the meanings of these names. So Saul is the son of Kish, right? Well, what does Saul mean? Saul means asked for, requested. Asked for, requested. That's what Saul means. And I believe that you could even just tangentially associate with that Saul of Acts, who later became Paul. The people of the Jewish people of that day were asking for persecution of the believers. And Saul was what they got. And they got persecution of the believers. And more of the blood of the innocents went on the heads. But back to this Saul. His name means requested. His father's name, Kish, means snare or bait. So we've already got the bait, asked for snare, asked for trap, the requested trap. A king is a trap. And if you think about Donald Trump today, he is a trap that God is laying out for many Christians. He's a trap. I'm not going to talk about that at length. I've talked about it in my other videos when I talk more about the prophetic videos. I'm going to bring in, do a video soon that I call the Prophecy of the Kings, and illustrate what I'm talking about. But Donald Trump is a trap for Christians today. He's a snare that God himself is laying out for unfaithful Christians who want a king instead of him. Abiel, the next name, means God my Father. So now we have the trap requested from God my Father. And who would be speaking this? The Word of God, which is Jesus. So Yeshua is saying, this is the trap requested from God my Father. Zeror means bundle or package. Okay, a package. Afia means an expelling of air. I'm sorry. Bechorath, I skipped one. Bechorath means the first born, the eldest, the earliest born is a better way to put it. In this package, since we're talking about a package, The first delivered is an appropriate one. It's not necessarily referring to a birth specifically. This is not an allusion to the first begotten Son, the only begotten Son of God. It's meaning just temporally speaking, in time, the earliest delivered, the first delivered. So the first delivered package, and aphia means an expelling of air, but it's not like this, not like the life-giving breath. It is much more this kind of that, like a mocking. It's a mocking expelling of air. It can be, or it just a forceful, just sudden, abrupt expulsion. Why would a mother name her kid that? Well, I'm sure maybe she was, doing Lamaze or something while she's giving birth. And going, I don't know. But that may be why that name was given. Maybe this woman tended to do that a lot, and so they named the baby that. They tended to name babies weird things sometimes. Anyways, but basically back to our prophetic message here. Saul, in his genealogy, is the requested trap from God my Father, delivered first, the package delivered first, with a mocking at it. So it's God the Father's basically, take it. That's the message of the genealogy. You want a king? Take it. And the reference to first delivered is prophetic and connects to all kinds of things. Because Saul is not going to be remembered as the great king of Israel, is he? He is not going to be remembered as the George Washington of ancient Israel. That distinction will go to King David, who comes second. Saul is not the George Washington of Israel. He's got a lot of shortcomings. As tall as he is, he's got a lot of shortcomings. Sorry, no, didn't mean to have a play on words there. David is the messianic figure. So in another case, Saul, the first delivered package, is symbolically also tied to Adam. And Yeshua, Jesus, symbolized by David, the king of Israel, to whom the messianic promise is given. David is symbolic of Jesus, and Jesus is the second Adam. He's the second package delivered. The Adam that doesn't sin. Of course, we know David sinned. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay, so anyways, we've got, so I just think that's pretty cool, that little genealogy, that's to add a little message. There's some prophetic connections there. Now, the donkeys of Kish, Saul's father, were lost. And Kish said to his son Saul, "Please take one of the servants with you and arise and go look for the donkeys." Okay, so first of all, I don't know how many donkeys there were. It was definitely more than one. Was it an entire herd? I don't know. I don't think people tended to have herds of donkeys, because they weren't going to really eat donkey meat, right? You have, donkey, if you have a couple donkeys and they're giving birth, usually you're probably selling them as beasts of burden to other farms. Or people whose donkeys got sick or something like that, because you're not going to eat the donkey. Donkeys weren't clean animals to eat. You're raising cattle, sheep, that kind of thing. The donkeys are used to pull carts, to ride on, things like that. So they weren't typically raising herds of them. So I don't know if it was a lot. But if Saul's father, Kish, was a mighty man of power, he may have had he probably had more than just a couple donkeys. So they probably would have had them in pairs. Was it all of his donkeys that were lost? Doesn't say that either. It says the donkeys, but let's say somewhere between maybe 4 to 8, maybe just 2, anywhere. It doesn't really matter. Saul's father had lost the donkeys. And this is another element that is showing that Saul is not Jesus. He's not a type or figure of Jesus. Jesus is the good shepherd who goes out looking for the lost sheep. Saul goes out looking for lost donkeys. Okay, donkeys are stubborn. Um, we all know what donkeys are like. And in this case, the lost donkeys are the people of Israel, figuratively. That's not what's meaning. He really was looking for donkeys, literal physical donkeys. But symbolically, this is alluding to the fact that Saul is being sent to gather up, to find these lost donkeys of the people of Israel who are so stubborn and wanting a king. In the end, Saul doesn't find them. He doesn't gather them. They're found and gathered by another who isn't mentioned, but that would be King David. And if we're comparing to Adam, it's Jesus. Okay. So Kish, let's see, he said, take this one of the servants, go look for the donkeys. So he passed through the mountains of Ephraim. And honestly, I mean, these names actually, I think, do kind of mean something too. But let's read through it, and then we'll talk a little bit about them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the meanings of these names. But so he passed through the mountains of Ephraim and through the land of Shalisha, but they did not find them. They passed through the land of Shalim, and they were not there. Then he passed through the land of the Benjamites, but they did not find them. You know what? I'm going to read a little more. When they had come to the land of Zuph, Saul said to his servant who was with him, "Come, let us return, lest my father cease caring about the donkeys and become worried about us." And he said to him, "Look, there is in this city a man of God, and he is an honorable man. All that he says surely comes to pass. So let us go there. Perhaps he can show us the way that we should go." Then Saul said to his servant, "But look, if we go, what shall we bring the man? For the bread in our vessels is all gone, and there is no present to bring to the man of God. What do we have?" And the servant answered Saul again and said, "Look, I have here at hand 1/4 of a shekel of silver. I will give that to the man of God to tell us our way." Formerly in Israel, when a man went to inquire of God, he spoke thus, "Come, let us go to the seer," for he who is now called a prophet was formerly called a seer. Okay, and that's just a little historical indication that this book was written sometime after these events were recorded, but he was recording faithfully as he's including ancient titles for things. Now, by sometime after, I don't mean hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean probably during the time of the kings, this was, or at least in the time of David, this was being written down. Okay. Where was it? Okay, so let's talk about this. So just this journey they're doing, it says that Saul is a Benjaminite, right? He's a Benjaminite. And he's living in Benjamin. He's from Benjamin. But they go and start looking in the mountains of Ephraim, which is another tribe. They go to 3 locations, Shalisha and then Shalim. They weren't there. And then he passed through the land of the Benjamites, and they came to the land of Zuph. So there's actually 3 kind of localized areas mentioned. Shalisha, Shalim, and Zuph. 3 parts. But this is quite the journey. And, you know, I saw a commentary where a commentator was asking just how stupid Saul was. They were accusing him of not being very clever. Maybe handsome, but not so clever, because why can't he find the donkeys? You know, why are they so hard to find? When did they go missing exactly? You know, how long have they been gone? Because why aren't they just following their tracks? You know, a good tracker would seem to be able to find them. This doesn't seem that complicated unless they think they're on the road and there's just a lot of hoof prints on the road. That's possible. But why are they going so far? And it's taken them multiple days. He says, "For the bread in our vessels is all gone." So they had money for a trip. And you know, we can't authoritatively say for sure what's going on in the minds and hearts of Saul and his servant, and you know, etc. But I'm just human nature. What do we think must be going on here? Well, if the donkeys are lost, then they're having so much trouble finding them, they're going for days, like wandering around mountains and valleys. This seems a little crazy to think the donkeys went that far. Uh, why wouldn't we just think the donkeys are like in the next field eating grass? Why are we traveling for days looking for these donkeys? It doesn't seem natural. Um, how long was it before? I mean, again, so for them to go looking for days means that they really think these donkeys have had time to go a distance away. So, how did they get lost, and why did it take so long to report their loss? Was this other servants who were negligent? Was it Saul himself was who was supposed to be taking care of them? He was lazy, and the donkeys got away. And the father, when he found out days later, is coming and saying, "Hey, go find these." That kind of makes sense. I can picture that. And Kish doesn't tell him take this servant X. He says take one of the servants. So who is Saul going to choose? He's going to choose a friend of his. He's going to choose a guy he likes. And they're probably going on a road trip. They're probably, you can tell from the text Saul is young. They're probably taking this as an opportunity to go for a road trip, saying, "Yeah, hey, let's go look for donkeys." That's what I'm imagining is happening. They said, "Yeah, let's go look for donkeys. Let's go on a road trip. Let's pack up our stuff. Let's kind of go. We're going. Yeah, let's go through Ephraim, this other tribe. Let's go see the mountains over here, etc." They're taking a road trip. They're probably stopping in taverns at night. You know, having some beer, ale, whatever was being served then, and they're exhausting their money. And so after a point, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I can just picture this. After a point, Saul's going, "Hey, we need to go back because my father's probably worrying about us more than the donkeys now." I say, "Yeah, they've been gone that many days." Makes sense. So, anyways, the meaning of the names, Shalisha means 1/3 or triangular. That's kind of a debate as to which it means. So if it means 1/3, there's kind of an allusion to this is 1/3 of the trip they're doing because they have 3 locations: Shalisha, Shalim, and Zuf. Shalim means like valley or hollowed out area. So this is probably referring to a place that's like a valley. And then honeycomb is what Zuf means, the sweetness, payoff, the dessert. So in that sense, if we look at those names kind of prophetically, it's like Shalisha saying you've got 1/3 of the trip done. You get the Shalim and it's hollow. You haven't found these donkeys. You haven't found what you're looking for. You get the Zuf, boom, payoff, honeycomb. But what is the payoff? Not the donkeys. They're going to meet Samuel. And he's going to be given the kingship. Another possibility is just place names, Shalisha, as if it means triangular, it could be referring to the triangular pattern of Saul's circuit, because later we're going to see that Samuel is going to tell Saul, he's going to say to him, "Tomorrow I'm going to tell you everything that's in your heart." And what he ends up talking to him about is the kingship. And we're also going to see a reference to the desire of Israel and how Saul immediately understands what he's talking about. And so perhaps there was this awareness in Saul as a jock, as a son of a mighty man of power, as one who is the most handsome of Israel and the tallest among everybody around, that the people of Israel are asking for a king. And perhaps some people have suggested to him that he could be king. He's handsome, he's tall, his dad has money. Why wouldn't he be king? And perhaps this little reference to the triangular Shalisha is reference to him kind of searching the area where Samuel normally goes. Maybe. I don't know. You could also argue I'm stretching or trying to pull something out that's not there. It's just an idea to consider. But some other things, though. Now let's talk more about the spiritual aspect of this. So, uh, Saul said to his servant, "Come, let's return." Okay, and the servant says, "Look, now there is in this city a man of God. He is an honorable man. All that he says surely comes to pass." Why doesn't Saul know about Samuel? Why is it that this lower servant knows about a man of God who is honorable and that everything he says comes to pass? Why doesn't Saul know about Samuel? That's a really good question. Saul, who's supposed to be the king of Israel, is going to be anointed as the king of Israel, is not aware, A, who Samuel is, B, that everything that Samuel says comes to pass, and C, where he is in that moment. The servant knows. He knows even what city he's in. And that would indicate that I might be wrong about the Shalisha being the triangular, kind of half-heartedly looking for him. But it is obvious from the text that the servant knows all about Samuel and Saul does not. This means Saul has no curiosity about spiritual things. He has no hunger for it. If he was hungry for the things of God, would he not know about Samuel? Wouldn't he? He's not ever venerated as a man of faith. And this shows us that right here. So why is God choosing him if he's not a man of faith? Well, the whole life of Saul is an object lesson to the whole people of Israel and to us today. Not to choose leaders who are tall and handsome and powerful. Not to look at and wealthy. Not to look at people's outward appearance, but to look at the inner character of their heart. Doesn't matter how tall and handsome and strong and wealthy a man is. If his spirit is weak, then he will crumble in the face of pressure and compromise. And this is what we see Saul doing over and over again. So God chose him purely based on his physical appearance and social status. God chose him purely based on the things humans look at to show Israel this is not how you choose a leader. But of course, Israel was ready to embrace him because he had those qualities. So the servant knows about Samuel. And the servant again said to Saul, and so Saul, who's leading here? Saul or the servant? You know, Saul's just coming up with the problems, and the servant's coming up with the solutions. So who is leading Saul? Leaders bring the solutions. The people bring the problems. The leaders bring the solutions. That's how it's supposed to work. And supposedly this man's going to be king. But he can't even figure out how to pay Samuel or how to he doesn't know where Samuel is. And then when he says, hey, there's this prophet, this seer in the city, we go see him. And Saul is like, oh, well, what are we going to bring him? We don't have any bread. We don't have any presents. We don't have any money. We can't go see him. No faith. No faith. And the servant answers again, look, I have here at hand 1/4 of a shekel of silver. The servant's going to pay. And 1/4, of course, is related to the world. 4 is related to the world. So it's a worldly payment he's offering. He's saying, hey, we got a worldly payment we can offer this seer to tell us what we want to hear, to help us find these donkeys. Because they've got worldly concerns. They're not concerned with the things of God. They're like, maybe this man can tell us where the donkeys are. That's what we care about. We're not thinking, let's go to hear a man of God who everything he says comes to pass. Let's not go ask him about our lives. Let's not go ask him about the future of Israel. Let's not ask him to tell us what Yahweh wants from us. Now, I just need to know where my donkeys are. So they're going to go, and they're saying, basically, what's the difference between a prophet? We associate prophecy with seeing the future, and there is that sense to it. But a prophet also exhorts and calls people to do better. But the word seer is related to seeing. They can see the future, just like the prophet. So verse 10. Then Saul said to his servant, "Well said. Come, let us go." Well said. All right, you found the solution. So you know about this guy, and you've got the money. Great. You've got it all covered. I'm just going to go along for the ride. And that's kind of what we see Saul doing through most of his reign. And then he gets jealous over David later when David actually goes out and does some work. So they went to the city, does not name the city, where the man of God was. This is Samuel. As they went up the hill to the city, they met, sorry, they met some young women going out to draw water. Is the seer here? And they answered them and said, "Yes, there he is just ahead of you. Hurry now, for today he came to this city because there is a sacrifice of the people today on the high place." So this would not be a pagan sacrifice. And this may be a little bit surprising because we think of the sacrifices only happening in the temple of God, in the tabernacle. And that was the center of worship. But from the Old Testament, we get the understanding that there were high places. We know there were high places in Israel, but that originally these high places were, in the days of Samuel, also designed for the worship of Yahweh. And they would do peace offerings there and sin offerings, but they would not do the Day of Atonement. And the mass feast gatherings, everything would always be at the tabernacle. But these were more local churches, localized worship services, so to speak, and fellowship dinners for more weekly worship because people couldn't necessarily get to the tabernacle from where they were all the time. So this seems to say that this wasn't a bad practice by itself, as long as they were doing the sacrifices according to God's law. Because Samuel is there approving of it, and he's a man of God. He's not going to be associated with a pagan sacrifice. And I'm sure that would have been done by priests, minimum Levites, but probably priests. Because the priest family, there was a lot of priests. It wasn't just a couple guys. As soon as you come into the city, you will surely find him before he goes up to the high place to eat. For the people will not eat until he comes, because he must bless the sacrifice. Afterward, those who are invited will eat. Now therefore go up, for about this time you will find him. So they went up to the city. As they were coming into the city, there was Samuel going out toward them on his way up to the high place. So Samuel, an older man, is about the business of God. Saul and his servant are still, you can tell they're younger guys. They're engaging young women. So they probably saw some teenage girls going down to the well to draw water. That's a lot of the young women would do that. We see that throughout the Old Testament. The well was down low because you want to get to the water table. You need to be low as possible. You're not going to typically try to dig a well up on a hill, and the city was up on a hill. But they're engaging these women, saying, "Hey, ladies, is there a seer here?" They're and I'm sure the ladies were looking and saying, "Oh, this is handsome and tall." Anyways, they're telling him, but the ladies are giving him good information. They're saying, "Hey, we're doing the sacrifice. Samuel's coming to bless it. We can't start until he gets here to bless it." So Saul goes up there. As they were coming into the city, there was Samuel coming out toward them on his way up to the high place. Now the Lord had told Samuel in his ear the day before Saul came. So Yeshua spoke to Samuel in his ear and told him, Tomorrow, about this time, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin, and you shall anoint him commander over my people Israel, that he may save my people from the hand of the Philistines. For I have looked upon my people, because their cry has come to me. That is the word of Yahweh. I do want to point out one other thing. Benjamin means son of the right hand. So that is a messianic title, a kingly title. And in this sense, that is applicable to Saul, okay, as the coming king. And we didn't mention Ephraim. The region they started off in looking for these donkeys means doubly fruitful. So they were looking for donkeys, and they came away from a kingship. They came away with a kingship. This is definitely doubly fruitful. But I want to look at, you shall anoint him commander over my people Israel. Not just over the military force, but over the people, that he may save my people from the hand of the Philistines. So Saul is going to deliver the people of Israel from the Philistines. Ultimately, the ultimate deliverance would come through Saul's death, because while he became successful in his battles against the Philistines, which would be empowered by God, he primarily did that once David was brought on board. He did have victories, but when David came on board, that's when he really overcame the Philistines. And that continued. And then when David left him, Saul dies at the hands of the Philistines. So, and then David finished them off when he came into his kingship. So ultimately, the people of Israel are going to be delivered from the hand of the Philistines. And Saul will play a part in that. He's not going to be a complete failure as a king. He will do some good things and have some good battles. And God is providing this to help them, even though ultimately it's a snare. So when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said to him, "There he is, the man of whom I spoke to you. This one shall reign over my people." Then Saul drew near to Samuel in the gate, and he said, "Please tell me, where is the seer's house?" So, as I said, Samuel was coming out of the city to go up to the high place, higher up on whatever hill or mountain was attached. And so they met in the gate. "Please tell me, where is the seer's house?" Samuel answered Saul and said, "I am the seer. Go up before me to the high place, not into the city, but up to the high place. For you shall eat with me today, and tomorrow I will let you go, and will tell you all that is in your heart." This means that Saul has the kingship in his heart, most likely, because that's what Samuel's going to talk to him about. "But as for your donkeys that were lost 3 days ago, do not be anxious about them, for they have been found." So he's saying, forget this little worldly detail you're worried about that you were going to pay me a quarter shekel for. Don't worry about it. See, there's no record of him paying Samuel anything. This is the problem with the world. The world thinks that men of God, that men who serve God, are paid professionals who exist to provide spiritual services. And you pay, according to, in the world's eyes, a priest, a prophet, whoever, a pastor, to do marriages, to do weddings, to do baptisms, to do little ceremonies, to maybe give you some counseling once in a while. But they don't, the world does not view a man of God like Samuel as being the one who would actually feed them. They're thinking, I need to give this pastor money to get what I need. And actually, they should just ask of the pastor, the man of God, say, "Feed me, teach me what you know from God." And that's what Jesus said to the Samaritan woman that he met at the well. "If you knew who it was speaking with you," he said, "you would ask me for living water, and I would give it to you." A true man of God feeds others. He doesn't need to be fed. Does it mean we don't support pastors and churches and things like that financially? You absolutely should. But they shouldn't ever have to ask for it, right? You shouldn't have to, pastors shouldn't have to get up on stage and talk to you about tithing. You should just do it. All right, let's see. So he's telling them, there's donkeys you're worried about. Don't worry about it. They're found. And on whom is all the desire of Israel? Is it not on you and all your father's house? That may not be understood by you immediately. Saul understood it immediately. What is the desire of all Israel? We just saw it in chapter 8. This isn't a small thing that was unknown. This meeting of the elders of Israel and the people of Israel asking Samuel, the only judge, to give them a king. And he says, go every man to a city. This is a national event. Everybody would have been talking about it. Everybody wants a king. Everybody wants the king. So when he says all the desire of Israel, he's referring to the kingship. He's saying, on whom is the kingship? This thing that all of Israel wants. Is it not on you and your father's house? Saul immediately knows what he means. He's saying, what? And Saul answered and said, am I not a Benjamite of the smallest of the tribes of Israel, and my family the least of all the families of the tribe of Benjamin? Why then do you speak to me like this? Now here, you can see this in one of two ways. You can see it as actual humility, but I don't think so. You can see it as insecurity, which is not humility. Insecurity is a form of pride or ego. Insecurity is a negative form of ego. People who are very prideful are actually very insecure in many ways. They bounce back and forth between arrogance and insecurity. Arrogance and insecurity. And this is what we see in Saul. So Samuel's alluding to the fact that all that is in Saul's heart is around the kingship. He's tall, he's handsome. I'm sure people have suggested it. And they've been talking about things on this road trip. They've been encountering other people, chatting with them. I'm sure there's conversation going, Samuel's going to give us a king. Who's the king going to be? That would have been the main question. The political debate of the day. Who's going to be the king? And you probably, now that I'm thinking about this, you would have had candidates. You would have had people, mighty men of power from different cities being proposed. What about that guy? What about this guy? That would be a good guy if Samuel chose him. Those conversations were happening. So this isn't like a surprise to Saul that there's a kingship conversation happening in his country, that people have been proposed as candidates. And him or his father, given the description at the beginning, were probably thrown out there as names at some point. And so Saul's answer is probably a mixture of false humility combined with insecurity. He's saying, am I not a Benjamite, the smallest of the tribes of Israel? Why does he say that? Because actually, the land of Benjamin was like the smallest territory in all the territories of Israel. All the tribes, it got the smallest allocation of land, and it was the last born of the tribes of Jacob. So 12th born, last born, youngest child, kind of a rebel. We see the Benjamites are kind of crazy and rebellious and unruly and judges, and a lot of them have to be killed. Almost all of them were killed because of some terrible Sodom-like sexual immorality going on there in the book of Judges. Therefore, their population would have been smallest as well, because just a couple hundred years before, they killed almost all of the Benjaminites and only a small remnant remained. They would have had to been really prolific with babies to catch up to the other tribes after that in population size. So Benjamin is kind of the least favored of the tribes. It's not Jacob loved Benjamin, but God doesn't seem to. But he's saying, am I not a Benjaminite of the smallest of the tribes of Israel, and my family the least of all the families of the tribe of Benjamin? What is this? Is his father not a mighty man of power in Benjamin, it just said? This definitely seems like false humility combined with insecurity to me. Is my family not the least of all the families of this tribe of Benjamin, the smallest of the tribes? Why do you speak to me like this? Now Samuel took Saul and his servant and brought them into the hall. So he didn't even answer the question. He probably senses it's ingenuine or just insecure. And he had them sit, and Samuel doesn't really care. Samuel's not about, let me disciple and nurture this young man. He's like, look, this is dumb. Israel shouldn't have asked for a king. This is rebellion against God. God says, you're the one he chose. Okay, I'm going to do it. Now Samuel took Saul and his servant and brought them into the hall. And I do think he had an affection for Saul. I do think that. We see that in later chapters. But he took Saul and his servant and brought them into the hall and had them sit in the place of honor among those who were invited. They were about 30 persons. So this is how you do, the sacrifices of the Old Testament weren't just about burning up a whole animal. Depending on the offering, much of the flesh of the meat was saved and set aside for the priests. And specifically, we're going to see that this is most likely a peace offering that's been done. But the meat of the animal being sacrificed, the fat was burned up, but a lot of the meat was eaten in a fellowship meal. And so that's what's going on here. They sacrifice. This is like a Sunday dinner, right? The way they worshiped was they would go, and the center of the worship service was going to be this sacrifice of the animal. But they had songs. They would sing. They would pray. They would bless the sacrifice. They would offer the sacrifice like a peace offering, right? This was a peace offering, which means a prosperity offering, where this is a worship service of gratitude, Father, for all your provision and blessings. We're not asking you to give more in the fertility ritual. We're praising you for what you've already given. The worship of Yahweh is very different. And then they would take the meat from the sacrifice, cook it together, and then have a fellowship meal. So this is like a big Sunday dinner, about 30 people there. Samuel said to the cook, bring the portion which I gave you, of which I said to you, set it apart. So the cook took up the thigh with its upper part and set it before Saul. So the right thigh of a peace offering was given to the priest, And so in this case, Saul is being given the right thigh, which is the portion of meat of honor. And he's in turn giving it to Saul, indicating you are the honored guest of this gathering. This is a very strong statement in front of the people, the 30 people gathered. And Samuel said, here it is, what was kept back. It was set apart for you. Eat, for until this time it has been kept for you. Since I said I invited the people. So Saul ate with Samuel that day. So 30 people are there, and you don't think they were talking about this after? There's got this kingship discussion going on throughout the land, political conversations everywhere. And then the judge that the elders of Israel have called Samuel to give them a king is now sitting at a sacrifice, a fellowship dinner, and giving a special special priestly portion of the sacrifice, the portion of honor. He's giving to a guest of honor, a young man who's taller than all other Israelites and more handsome than the Israelites, the son of a wealthy man from Benjamin. I think those 30 people left that fellowship dinner abuzz with gossip. When they had come down from the high place into the city, Samuel spoke with Saul on top of the house. So they came down from the high place back in the city, and now they're on top of a house. And this is, think like, okay, Sunday dinner, then what? Then we go home and we lay in the hammocks. I don't think they were laying in hammocks, but the top of the house is where you kind of kick back and relax. And there was usually a guest house out there. You'd have little shade things built up there. But you were outside on your, it's like what we do on our patios or our backyards today. So they were sitting up there, and they arose early, because again, if Samuel's visiting, and Saul is visiting, they're going to be staying on the roof of a house somewhere, because that's where the guest rooms were. That's where the guest rooms were built. They arose early, and it was about the dawning of the day that Samuel, and by the way, notice it didn't say what he spoke with him, but they had a more at length conversation. The next morning they arose early, and it was about the dawning of the day that Samuel called Saul on top of the house, saying, "Get up, that I may send you on your way." That's interesting. I hadn't noticed that little detail before. So they arose early. Okay, well, but Saul's not up. So who arose early? Well, it must have been they must be referring to a bunch of people, to other people who were up there or around. They all arose early, whoever's in Samuel's party. And it was at dawn. He's arising at dawn. And Samuel's calling to Saul on top of that. This seems to indicate Samuel's gone down now. And he's calling back up to Saul, saying, "Get up, that I may send you on your way." Again, lazier young man, sleeping in. And Saul arose, and both of them went outside, he and Samuel. As they were going down to the outskirts of the city, so past the well, etc., Samuel said to Saul, "Tell the servant to go on ahead of us." And he went on. So Samuel does not want the servant to hear these words only for Saul. "But you stand here a while, that I may announce to you the word of God." That's a powerful statement. A prophet of God that you already have verified. You say, this is a prophet of God. What he speaks are the words of Yahweh. So stand here a while, that I may announce to you the word of God. It's a powerful statement. Caveat to this, please note, Saul is not a man of faith. So when a person who is not a person of faith hears something like that, there's a part of them that thinks that these words are coming from their own heart, that these are Samuel's inventing this, that somehow he doesn't really have this awareness that really Yahweh is real and present and close, and he's speaking these words that are about to come. Instead, he's kind of thinking that Samuel is like him, and that he must have just impressed Samuel. And Samuel is the leader of Israel, the judge of Israel, and so Samuel is now going to say something powerful to Saul, and he's going to say it's the word of God because Samuel's a man of God. But deep in Saul, he's having suspicions and doubts, I'm sure, that this is really the word of God. He just thinks he doesn't have an experience with God speaking to him, so he can't conceive of that. There's one other thing. Oh, yeah, and just one more little detail. When you see details in a passage like this, he talked to the cook. It says they were up in the high place, and they moved back down the city. They were on the roof of the house, and they got up early. Then Samuel's down. He's calling up to Saul. It says, "Get up." That's not very flattering for an account about a king that's being anointed. And then it says as they were going down to the outside. So you're seeing detail in the location about where they met the women, going to the well. All these are little details that tell you that this is a historical document, a faithful witness to actual historical events, not mythology. Mythology does not include details like that. It doesn't see the need for it because that's not the purpose of mythology. All of those little details show that the author of this book was trying to get it right trying to be careful to report it exactly as it happened. And that this wasn't just retelling after retelling over campfires for centuries and then somebody wrote it down someday. When you have stories just told orally over campfires like this, you don't retain these little details about they were leaving when he said this and he was on the roof when he said that. And you wouldn't just even have a line that says Samuel spoke with Saul on top of the house without saying what he said. Because if you're telling a legend or a mythology, the storyteller would invent something. If he doesn't know what was said, he would just invent something to fill that gap. A historian would say, he spoke with him on top of the house. But the historian said, but I don't know what he said. No one knows that. No one remembers it, or wasn't there, or it's just not been recorded by anybody. So I'm not going to pretend like I know it's. I'm just going to say he spoke to him up there, period. That's all we know. All those are signs that it's a faithful history. Anyways, that is 1 Samuel chapter 9. Hope that was helpful to you, and I hope you have a great day. May God bless you and keep you.